Welcome to the OBR Streaming Network. This is a brand new episode of Things I Think I Know with my esteemed panel. The man next to me is the one and only Quincy Carrier. He's the host of Quincy Carrier Live on Mondays. You can follow him on Twitter at Quinn_C. And of course, Abby Mueller. And she does a lot of shorts for us as well as her own podcast. Make sure you check in on all that stuff at Abby_Mueller_ on Twitter. Lots going on this week with the Browns. Lots of reaction, emotion, rebuild, proclamations, play calling changes. It's all going down in Browns world. So getting scolded by the entire internet and people like Michael Irving, which is irking in some way.
I will say, of all the videos that came out of players scolding the fans of the city of Cleveland, if I have to pick a favorite, it was Jameis Winston dressed like a character straight from a Medea movie, like just telling us how he felt. And I was like, Jameis, I've never disagreed with you more, but I can't find it. I can't help but find this somehow oddly endearing. Like you're in these yellow shades saying things that I just don't agree with, but like you're just so earnest about it. And then like Jameis was trying to like ride the fence a little bit where he was like, look, I love these fans. They so passionate. And I'm like, hey man, you just had nothing to say, but you felt like you had to cook, and I understand that. Like
the next day when he came back and kind of was like trying to backtrack a little, and he was saying just like, yeah, show up to the stadium, let us know how you feel. I'm like, I don't know if you actually want that, Jameis. I don't know if you want that.
He like couldn't get any closer to some of the cameras. I was like, man, he is right on top of the camera right now.
And I'm just like, how fast did he get dressed into that fit? Like, that's the thing. See, look, sports is hilarious at times because, like, you see him in that clip and he's wearing that fit. But I need to get the in between there. How do you go from being furious after playing a football game to getting in that fit, and then you get furious again? In that part is the hilariosity and the ridiculousness of what is sports at times. But
it's my understanding that they got together behind closed doors and were like, we have to say something about this.
Really?
Yes.
Interesting.
You know what? It's going to be hilarious. And this is just a little pre thing. I think I know. This is going to be like if they go on a run in the second half of the season. This is going to be what galvanized the team, ironically enough. So we'll see what that turns.
That'd be great. Whatever it takes, man.
Right.
Whatever it takes. I just played Shelby Harris's video in my last show.
That one was
you lost the fans, and he's been on my show. So I started the show with like, and it's like him like saying, "This is Shelby Harris. Listen to All Eyes on Cleveland," and then played his clip of "You lost the fans."
I don't think anybody asked Nick Chubb any questions about this. And I'm like, I've never been more glad at nobody.
Did you? He spoke on it. He was very good
today. It was the best answer I heard of anyone. He was just like, fans just want us to win. So we're just going to go win. It was like,
they asked him a follow-up question. He's like, I think a win will solve a lot of problems.
Was it Mike Payton? If I just had 22 Nick Chubbs.
Yep, exactly. He's so
I was like, that's all anyone needed to say ever. It was just, fans want us to win. We got to win.
Exactly. They also came out and said they all started pointing out that it was not everybody all of a sudden. It was like in Jameis's second quote, it was, we know it wasn't everybody. It was like somebody talked to him, maybe with PR team.
Oh, yeah. Sure. JW, Peter, all of them. Yeah, gave him to talk to. Like, hey, bro, we can't
change the messaging on this a little bit, guys. So, All right. People are so tired of that topic. I got scolded about that one on my previous show. So, all right, let's do this. Mine's real simple. There's a lot of crap out there right now about Stefanski, the play calling, his reasoning behind it. I have my thoughts on that range from purely football to a little bit political, because I think he's kind of a pretty calculated thinker. You know what I mean? As far as political, as far as like within the Browns, not
like maneuvering within the system, right?
Yes,
right,
exactly.
Not the election year.
Not the election, please no.
I was like, what are we adding to the
Where
show?
are we going? Yeah,
Like,
no.
That's the only other thing the Browns need for controversy, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly. But I don't think there's any level of meddling from. I think this was his decision. I do. I don't think it was ownership. I think he made this decision on his own after thinking it through. I will say the thing that I think I know is that I actually think, despite everything that's going on and all being said, that Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry will be the GM and head coach next year. I know that's a really flat out take, but I don't think either of them are going anywhere.
I agree with you on that, because I did a video earlier this week talking about like who's on the hot seat, who's not. I don't think people understand the kind of mess Jimmy Haslam is, right? Because like we all understand Jimmy Haslam's a bit of a mess sometimes. Every owner in pro sports basically is. But you got to understand your mess specifically. And Jimmy, like sometimes people get this image of Jimmy as like, oh, he's going to go gung-ho and make decisions. And that's never been the problem with Jimmy. The problem with Jimmy is twofold. One, he really cares about public perception at times, like as far as it goes from him as a football guy. And two, he is easily manipulatable. The whole Hugh Jackson era wasn't Jimmy making decisions. It was Hugh whispering into Jimmy's ear and then Jimmy being like, yeah, that does make sense, right? Like, so that's the kind of thing that Jimmy has become kind of susceptible to. I think having Deep Podesta in there gives him a layer, so where that's not as prevalent as it used to be. So I don't think Jimmy is in there day to day. Like we don't see him at the stadium as much as we used to, right? Like he's not visibly in front of all of this. I agree with you on that he's probably not going to want the optics of firing a 2-time coach of the year. And you're not going to keep Kevin and fire the GM. So you're probably going to stick with Andrew Berry here, right? If I had to point an odd man out, I think the odd man out seems obvious at this point. It's like, hey, let's see what Ken Dorsey can bring to this offense, and like see if it makes sense to move forward with him here as we move towards finding our next guy. Is Ken Dorsey going to be a part of that plan? Because we know what we can do and what I like and what I can go with. But, you know, maybe we can achieve more with some of the template that we can get from Ken Dorsey is probably what they're thinking. And I also think the play calling thing is big of a deal as I think some people have made out of it. And I get it why, because play calling is like the number one topic on every sports talk show. But sometimes I think we forget there's a procedural element to play calling. And I think in last week's game, they had 1 million pre-snap penalties, and you can see Kevin get like visibly frustrated with this. And I think a large part that triggered this whole thing is that right there, where they're just they got to figure out how to get this communication clear on the headset so we can get this play call in, because you know you want to get this figured out before you head on the road again, and you got to go back to a silent count. Yeah,
too much collaboration.
Yeah, I think that point with Dorsey makes a ton of sense on why they would shift over to him. I guess my only ever concern that I still have with Jimmy is kind of what you said about how he is easily manipulated, where I'm like, at any moment, like who is in his ear, who is telling him what to do? Like that's where I start to fear when he does have that going on, where he is known to make some rash decisions because of how easily manipulated he is. So as much as I do agree with you, I think Kevin and Andrew, I think Jimmy does want to, like is leaning on the side of wanting to keep them around. He does not want to have to blow everything up, start over again, you know, go back to square one and you know, make something up again. I just, that part of me is always like, Jimmy has it in him to make some bad decisions. And I get worried for that. But from Kevin's perspective, I do think it makes sense to have Ken take on play calling for all the reasons you listed, but also so that like if things go poorly for the rest of the year and the offense continues to be bad, it's just like, okay, then Ken goes and we move on to a new coordinator.
And I want to bring up a point here because I think some people have said, oh, well, it doesn't make sense that we changed the quarterback. Well, you didn't change it. The quarterback got injured, and now you're changing the play caller. To me, this does make a ton of sense because yes, Jameis loves play action, but Ken Dorsey ran play action 9th highest in the league 2023 with Josh Allen from week 1 to 11 before he got fired. So it's not like Ken Dorsey doesn't do play action either. But what Ken Dorsey loves and what got him in trouble is the deep ball. Like, he loves deep intermediate football passing exchanges, and that is something that probably wouldn't have made sense with Deshaun or DTR, because these guys are like 65% of their passes are within 10 yards or behind the line of scrimmage. But if you're going to switch to Jameis, then it does make sense to be like, okay, well, we know Ken likes to throw the ball deep. So even though this is me and Ken's offense, it might make sense to have him have his finger on the button of what we call within that offense, because he's going to have a better feel for what Jameis probably wants to do in this offense than Kevin would, because Kevin's going to call, Kevin's more conservative when it comes to the play calling. He's going to want screens, stuff like that. Jameis, he's never seen a post on the play action boot he doesn't like, right? Like, he's just going to go deep. And that's kind of something that I think fits more with Jameis, and why it kind of makes sense that, they would make the change this week. The procedural stuff, the change. Jameis had 7 intermediate passes last week in one drive. Yeah. The highest any other Browns quarterback had, 3. Yeah. Like, that's a drastic change in where he's going to attack and how you need to call for somebody that's going to attack like that. So, Kevin's more used to the Kirk Cousins of the world, and maybe this is him like, okay, well, let me just see. He's a gunslinger. Let's let Ken do that, and that might just be a better fit for it.
Yeah, I think that streamlining the process is a big part of this, right, on the sideline. And the thing that I wondered about is kind of what you spoke to, Quincy, is it didn't make sense at first to me, because I was kind of like, okay, if you're going to streamline the process, why wouldn't the guy who hasn't given up play calling for 4 years or 3.5 years, why wouldn't he be the one to step into that role and send Dorsey up in the booth, or tell him to go coach quarterbacks or whatever, right? Kick rocks, just find something else to do. You can still have input, but less, because you see them on the sideline and they're talking to each other like 10 feet away. You can even see it on the all 22. And part of that is probably why they're having trouble getting plays in on time sometimes and stuff, maybe too much collaboration. So streamlining it makes sense. And with Jameis being quarterback, I was kind of thinking, maybe if they weren't 1-6, that may have been the solution. I think 1-6 has more to do with this being like, let's let Dorsey do it at this point. And I'll step back, and if it works, I look good, and if it doesn't work, I don't look any worse, right?
I'm not 100% confident that if there was a world where we switched to Jameis and the record wasn't a disaster, that this same thing wouldn't have happened. Like, I think
I think they could see like Flacco out of this, like him and Flacco together out of this. Don't you think
people compare Jameis and Joe Flacco together a lot, but like, they're not like, they have similar strains, right? And like, Joe Flacco threw interceptions, but the interceptions Joe Flacco threw, some of them were because he likes to go deep. A lot of them were because he's old, right? And like the shorter interceptions that went kind of cross field. Jameis, his attacking philosophy is like, he likes to be, he would want, like, you would want to call some Fort Vert with him. You would want to kind of stretch the field vertically, and not just in kind of a creasing, like, play action way that you would do it with Joe Flacco. Like, you do want to put Jameis in shotgun and let him read and get through his progressions a little bit. Not to the same extent that they did with Deshaun, but it is a little bit of a different attack. Like, yes, Jameis does do some of the under center stuff. He does do the play action stuff, but he is 10 years the junior of Joe Flacco. So like, he still is very comfortable in all the spread stuff. So you do want to do some spread stuff with Jameis, because he's going to be as comfortable with that as Joe Flacco might have been just running pure West Coast Kubiak offense, which is what the Browns ran last season. Like, Jameis can do some of that, but he's never been a pure West Coast guy. Like, you do want to do some spread stuff in there. So I do think it makes sense to kind of flip who the play caller is based on the mentality that you're going for in the passing game. Because what you don't want is additional friction. Like, you're arguing with Ken Dorsey on the call, or y'all trying to figure out something, and then Jameis is like, when am I going to get a shot? Like, I need a shot to get down, and that adds another layer of complexity. Now it's like, okay, Jameis wants to go deep. Ken wants to go deep. We got spread. We got play action. They can figure it out. Kev's going to figure out something else on the sideline.
Yeah, which he needs to do because it's kind of a mess everywhere else. So, all right, what's your thing you think you know, Abby?
All right, so kind of staying in the quarterback conversation, I feel like there's been a lot of debate about Jameis or DTR. Like, who should the Browns try to focus on? Obviously, for this moment in time, they're moving forward with Jameis as the starter. But part of me is a little bit more interested for them to maybe try some more DTR. I think I don't know how much to put in all of these rumblings that have been coming out recently in the last, honestly, couple days about Jameis, and like Kevin doesn't like him, the organization's sick of him, like all of those conversations. Yeah, all of that is a little interesting to be coming out right now. And it makes me think that even like regardless of what happens for the rest of the season, he's not going to be back next year. They're not looking at him as their bridge quarterback for, you know, whatever situation comes. And I would think that maybe they would want to see a little bit more of DTR, what they could, you know, grow in him throughout the rest of the season, and then potentially have him as a backup in the future with whatever direction they try to go as a starter. Because I'm not sure if at this point they see him as, you know, a starter of the future, but could be potentially, you know, a consistent backup. So I personally, I think I'm more leaning towards that, but I feel like that's been kind of they're such different quarterbacks. So it's such a debate, and they serve such different purposes for this team.
Yeah, I wrote on Tuesday in the article version of Things I Think I Know that it makes sense to get a quick look at Winston for a couple weeks, because you are seeing guys like Sam Darnold and Geno Smith have, you know, revitalized careers around the NFL, right? And so get a look at him. But if you don't see anything that blows you away, I think there's plenty of time to see DTR this season. I think at the bye week, maybe you make that change and it's DTR the rest of the way, because that's the evaluation you need to get, the more important one, I think.
The only pushback I'm going to give on that is there are DTR, and like, I get he's been put in some tough situations so far in his pro career where he's kind of had to jump in there. But there have been too many moments I've seen DTR not be able to turn the page on like a bad play and it snowball into more. Because that's exactly what happened. He got out there at the first. He was playing well. And
that
then
first
Cedric
throw
Tillman,
was a beautiful, perfect throw.
yeah, that first throw, the RPO stuff, he was working through his progressions pretty well. And then Cedric Tillman sits for no reason over the ball route and causes an interception, and it just went downhill so quickly for DTR. And it's not just that it gets kind of bad, it gets bad to the point to where like you get that feeling of like you need to pull the kid right now, because like he's melting down. And that's the one thing with DTR is like, he has to prove that he has the temperament to be able to handle this, right? Because I think it feels like at times we've seen the moment be too big for him a little often. Now, he did have that moment in Pittsburgh where he did come back up to the moment. There was a lot of support on the sideline for him for that, though. And that's the thing with him is like, if he can't maintain the temperament to stay out there, then he can't stay out there, because then you're just putting everybody in a really bad situation. Because when he was confident and like, it just didn't feel like he was unprepared in this game. I know he compared it to the Baltimore game. I was watching. I was like, nah, you knew exactly what you're doing. You were working through everything, and then you made the interception, and then you start to hesitate, right? Like you didn't want to rip here, and then you start patting and rolling out when you're not supposed to roll out and all that. And I think that's the stuff that DTR has to figure out. And I don't know if that's something that can be solved by just like sitting down for a couple of weeks. Like, that's my main concern with them is, you know, on top of like, yeah, he throws a flat football and sometimes it's not accurate downfield, but those are just football evaluations. But sometimes I think the moment can get too big for him. And when it gets too big, it gets way too big for him to the point to where he almost becomes unplayable. And you don't want to put your team in a situation, even though they did it for the first 4 weeks of the season, where you have an unplayable quarterback.
Yeah, first 7 weeks. The question there is, real quickly before we get to your thing, Quincy, is so when they go back to DTR, because I think we all could probably agree at some point that's going to happen this season, I would think. When they go back to him, do you think they give the play calling back to Stefanski because of his demeanor?
I mean, by that point, they'll probably just figure it out. But I think you just kind of roll with what you have. If you're not getting, like, if we get 3 weeks from now, right after the bye week, and we're still getting the procedural penalties and all of that, you might walk out the bye week and Ken Dorsey just isn't here anymore.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, if they figure it out and they're not getting the procedural penalties, and Ken still knows who his personnel is. It's not like he's going to call like it's Jameis for DTR. And I think you would just want that going forward just for the end of the season, and then evaluate at the end of the season. But yeah. I don't know how much, like, it feels like there's been this friction of what the front office wants at quarterback and what Kevin wants at quarterback. Pretty much his entire time here, right? Where it's like, okay, we're going to work with Baker, and then Baker wasn't what Kevin wanted, right? And then you bring in Deshaun, and now we're hearing that Deshaun isn't what Kevin wanted, right? And it's like, we got to figure out, what does Kevin actually want at quarterback? Because I'm not sure if DTR is exactly what Kevin wants, right? Because he doesn't really do a lot of the play action stuff that Kevin likes to do. And Kevin loves throwing deep posts on play action and deep overs, and that's not a ball that DTR throws well. So I need Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski to really figure out what Kevin wants at quarterback, because it just doesn't seem like they've been successful at figuring that out at all. And I think it might be even Kevin that don't know what he wants at quarterback too.
Yeah. He wants Joe Flacco, probably. That's about it.
Probably.
Yeah, he's got to figure out, like, what kind of guy in the West Coast, like, Joe Flacco's they're not being developed anymore. Like, that is a dinosaur, right? Yeah. So it's like, what is the new version of what you're looking like, look like? Like, does it look like Shador? Does it play like more like Milroe or somebody like that? Yeah. Like, what is the skill set that he needs in order to be successful? Because I don't think they've had a clear vision of what that is, because it's so random, the skill sets they brought in at quarterback over the last 4 years.
Worst case scenario is that they end up still not being on the same page and draft another quarterback that doesn't fit what Kevin wants to do. So I agree with you. They're going to have to, like, really nail down what that looks like, and not just take someone because they're in the position to take, you know, the highest ranked quarterback or whatever that is.
Yeah, because DTR has got to be the last time we have this conversation.
Yeah, right? I can't do this again.
Yeah. All right, Quincy, what's your thing? You think you know?
I think the Browns are going to play much better football down the stretch than they started right now. And I think the signs are there. We're even showing before the quarterback went down. The defense quietly the last 2 weeks played pretty well, right? Only gave up 14 points this week to Joe Burrow and all of them. They played pretty well throughout the Philadelphia game. I remember thinking, man, the defense is giving you a chance to win this game. Special teams, pretty much the reason that you lost this game. They gave up 11 points here, right? 7 points on the kick return, 3 points on the missed field goal, and an extra point here, which, by the way, Dustin Hopkins sliding on those charges right now, because they ran Cade York out of town over much less egregious stuff than what Dustin is doing. But he has the fortune of building up some goodwill with the season before, and he's missing these kicks when the team's already 4 games below water. So it just don't hit the same, right? But I think that this team's going to play a lot better football down the stretch. Whether it's DTR or whether it's Jameis, when I saw DTR in there, I saw more of a focus. Like I could see what they're going for offensively. With Jameis, I know what they're going to go for offensively. Like it's not an identity in the sense that you do something so well that people know you for it, but it is an identity in the sense of like you're trying to achieve something on offense, which with the Watson offense this year, I just didn't know what they were trying to achieve and what they were trying to accomplish as a team while Watson was out there. Nick Chubb, right? He had to work through getting hit for the first time. I think the underrated part of him coming back is it's going to take him a couple of times bursting into the open field to get comfortable, because that's where he got injured, right? I know a lot of people are wondering like, oh, he's going to be nervous about getting hit or all this. Like, nah, what's going to make him nervous is when he gets into the open field, because he got into the open field one time last week and you could just see him trying to like feel out the contact, and he kind of went down earlier than he should have because of it. So I think he's going to get comfortable, kind of shake off the rust a little bit, but athletically, he still looks like Nick Chubb. So I think he'll be back sooner than later. You're getting Wyatt Teller back. We talked about this team doesn't feel physical. Wyatt Teller makes you feel physical because he's probably the most physical offensive lineman that you have. Hopefully you can get Jed Wills back or some solution there at left tackle, James Hudson, whoever it needs to be. And because James Hudson's a pretty decent run blocker, at least on that side. And you're getting healthier on the offensive line. David Njoku is weeks back from that high ankle sprain. I think there's a lot of things to suggest here that this team's going to play a lot better football just because they're healthier. They have a more focused identity on offense at this point. They can run the ball, do whatever they want behind it with Nick Chubb and maybe Jameis, maybe DTR, whoever they want to float in and out there. And then you also have the added advantage of knowing that this defense is playing much, much better. And that starts at the defensive line, right? Because I think Michael Hall has come in there and actually played some good minutes there for this team, giving them some good snaps. And I think that's made a world of difference. I think getting Quentin Jefferson off the field has made a world of difference there on the defensive line. And if you get better defensive play, you add that with being able to score more than 14 points, you're probably going to look a lot better. And that's not a hot take, because if you don't play better than this, you're going to finish as a 2-win team, which is ridiculous. I still think this team's going to find a way to get to at least 7 wins. So just the mathematics of that means that they're going to play much better down the stretch.
Yeah, I feel like even beyond Nick Chubb, I feel like we have seen some more glimmers of the rest of the run game. Against Philly, like a couple guys were really showing up then. And I don't think those guys are as consistent week to week as what you're going to get from Nick Chubb. But if they can, contribute here and there a little more, I think that's a positive part for the offense too.
Huge uptick in zone defensively, and they did it so much better last week. Like that's probably the best zone defense we've seen from them. And I thought that was hugely encouraging as far as change-ups that we've been talking about with Schwartz.
And you look at the rest of this schedule, what did look like world beaters early in this schedule. They're just not, right? Like the Chargers just aren't that dominant of a team. You play Pittsburgh at home on a Thursday night, which look, Pittsburgh's going to be a tough team to beat, but home on Thursday night, you have a significant advantage there. You have some opportunities to win some games down the stretch. You play the Saints, you play the Denver Broncos. Like there's some opportunities here for this team to win some football games. And I think the best way to make sure that you bounce back from any kind of situation is that you just win games, right? You're not gonna build a dynasty by losing intentionally. I've never seen a team tanking themselves into a dynasty. It's not like Kansas City decided to lose all their games and then they got Pat Mahomes. They were actively trying to win games and then use the resources they accumulated while still actively trying to win to go get Pat Mahomes. So if you want to build a winning culture, if you want to have a winning environment to develop a winning quarterback under, right? It's no mistake that all these teams that have franchise quarterbacks are also the teams that continue to have franchise quarterbacks even after they lose their franchise quarterbacks. You got to win. You got to win games. You got to make sure you can keep people in place so you can develop these guys long term. and then put them in a winning environment where they're not used to losing. And then you're probably going to have a much better chance of not ending up in 20 years of quarterback purgatory like the Browns did earlier this millennium.
Quincy, Carey, Abby, Mueller, great job as always. You guys are fantastic. Follow them both on Twitter. Keep it locked to the OBR as we'll carry you all the way through till Sunday and after with wall-to-wall coverage. This has been another edition of Things I Think I Know. For Quincy and Abby, my name is Brad Ward. We are out.